I've got this shelf out in my shop and I plan to use it for wood storage. Before I pile it up with wood, there's a couple of things I need to take into account. Number one, I want to get it mounted to the wall so that there's no chance of it tipping forward or tipping side to side with the weight. And the other thing I need to take into account is if you take a look at this level, you notice the bubble, it's off. As I raise it up, I'm about 3/8 of an inch low in the front. So I'm going to need to shim up the shelf. Now I can't just throw a couple of shims under it because, well, it could actually wobble off. So I have an idea. I've got some flooring lumber down here. This is a lumber called Kamaru, and it's extremely hard. It's 3/4 of an inch thick. So I'm thinking if I take my table saw and I cut a groove halfway through it, which would be 3/8 of an inch, straight through, and then 3/8 of an inch this way to form a 90-degree angle. And you can see that the legs of these shelves are simply, it's a 90 degree. So I can set that under this leg and make like a little foot for this to set on. That way it's not going to slip off of it. It should stay under the shelf no matter what, and it should give me the height I need to level my shelf. I want to cut the groove on my block of wood 3/8 of an inch in from the end, and then 3/8 of an inch in from the back end, and then 3/8 of an inch in across the front of the block. And then I'll split that block in half to form the two shims for my shelf. I took just an old pin blank here that I checked, it's perfectly square, and then I measured 3/8 of an inch from the blade to the wood, and I'm using that just as a measurement stick so that I don't have any binding along the fence. So it allows me to quickly set up my 3/8 of an inch cut. I've got the blade set for 5/16 of an inch. My piece of wood was just a 1/16 of an inch shy of 3/4, so the blade is 5/16 of an inch high. I'm just going to go ahead and run this through and make my 3 cuts. Let's line up our second cut here. Let's flip this around. Get my stop block in here. Tighten down the jig. Go, pull that out of the way, and we're ready for cut 2. I've got my 2 cuts. Let me loosen this up. Down the side of my block. Now what I'm going to do is flip the block over and make a cut down the front of the block. Tighten down my jig. Get my stop block out of the way, and let's cut. Let me get my block of wood off of here. There we go. Now you can see that it's ready to go. All I need to do is split it down the middle, and I'll have a shim for both sides of my shelf. So let me get lined up for that cut. We'll make it, and we'll see how it works. I set up another stop block exactly 1.5 inches from my blade because my piece of wood was 3 1/8 inches in length. So I'm going to remove this stop block. This will reduce any chance of binding. I've raised the blade high enough to cut completely through this piece of wood, and I'm just going to split it in half. Now what I have is 2 shims for my shelf. So I'm going to go back over to the shelf, and I'm going to put these under the legs, and I'm going to recheck the level, and hopefully these are thick enough to give me a nice level shelf, and then we'll work on getting that shelf mounted to the wall. I've got my shims mounted under both legs of my shelf. I'm really happy with how they turned out. I want to let you know that the steel on this shelf, you can kind of see it on that back leg. It's got a bend in it to give the shelf leg a little rigidity. So I had to make a second pass on my table saw because the 1/8 inch kerf of my blade wasn't enough to accommodate that. So I had to make one additional pass to widen the kerf out, or the slot in the shim out, and it's done a really nice job. Let me show you what it looks like on the level. And now you can see that the shelf is level front to back, as well as side to side, and it's ready to be loaded up. So I'm going to go get some boxes of wood and get this shelf packed up.